It was supposed to be a day of freedom, a day I'd finally carved out for myself, far away from the buzzing emails, endless meetings, and the grind of office life. A day for nothing but peace, the kind you dream about when you're buried in deadlines. I'd just finished my morning coffee, the sun streaming through the window, and I had that perfect moment of quiet. And then, it buzzed. My phone vibrated on the table, the sound sharp and jarring in the stillness. My heart skipped. I had set my phone to do not disturb, a small act of rebellion, a momentary break from the world. But there it was, a notification that couldn't be ignored. I reached for it. Still half dazed from the sleep I had barely caught the night before, and there it was, a new email from my boss. The words on the screen were too clean, too cold. It felt almost like a bad joke at first. Maybe I was still dreaming. I could feel the pulse in my temples, steady and slow, but the message on the screen was anything but. Effective immediately, your position is terminated due to violation of company policies. What? I stared at the words, trying to make sense of them. It didn't make sense. I was on vacation. I just landed a $2 million deal. No, I had secured it. Everything should have been celebratory. I should have been getting praise, accolades. Not this. Anger started to rise, but it was wrapped in confusion. This couldn't be real, not after everything I'd done. I had been loyal. I'd been there through the late nights, the sacrifices, the endless work. But now I was here, staring at a screen, feeling the weight of betrayal seep through the cracks of my stunned disbelief. The buzzing of my phone didn't stop. It was as if the universe was mocking me. I dropped the phone onto the table. The room felt too quiet. Cold sweat started to form on my neck, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. How could this be happening? How had I gone from being the golden child of the company to this? I felt lost, hollowed out. My heart raced and then slammed into my ribs like an angry drumbeat. This wasn't real, right? This couldn't be happening? Not to me, not like this. But it wasn't always like this. There was a time when I could still see the pride in their eyes when they spoke about my work. The deals I closed, the targets I hit, the endless hours I spent making sure everything was perfect. I remember the first big account I landed, a shaky handshake that felt like a mountain moving beneath me. I remember the late nights, the endless strategy calls, and the feeling of pure exhaustion that somehow always gave way to this quiet, this unspoken sense of satisfaction. I had put everything into this job. It was more than just a paycheck. It was my identity. I thought about the company constantly, even when I wasn't there. Every email I answered, every deal I negotiated, I was building something bigger than myself. I wasn't just a cog in the machine, I was driving it forward. I did it with pride. There was a rhythm to it all. I woke up early, drank too much coffee, spent my day navigating through high-stakes deals, client meetings, and presentations. There were mornings where I barely saw daylight, and nights where my only company was the glow of my laptop screen. I remember sitting in my office at 2 a.m., knowing that while the rest of the world slept, I was making something happen. I had no idea then that I was building a reputation that would later become my undoing. I was in it for the long haul. They called me their go-to person, the one who never let anything slip. It felt good to hear that, to know they trusted me, to know that my work was valued, or so I thought. And then there was the $2 million deal, the one I closed last month. I had fought for that contract like it was my last breath. The client was tough and impossible, but I somehow made it happen. I remember the meeting like it was yesterday. The client was tough as nails. Arms crossed, expression unreadable. But I had studied them, prepared for this moment, and when I made the pitch, they listened. The deal went through, and I felt the weight of 1,000 hours of work finally pay off. That day I thought, this is it. This is what it all comes down to. I walked into the office excited to share the news. Thought for sure I'd be met with applause, maybe even a thank you lunch. But now, looking back, I can't help but wonder if that was the moment when everything started to shift. The smiles. The congratulations, it all felt so empty now. I thought that success would be enough to earn me the respect I had worked for. All I felt was the silence. I had given them everything, poured my soul into my work, and for what? To be shown the door the moment I asked for a day off? I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. I remember the late nights in the office, the empty takeout containers strewn across the desk, countless hours I spent not with my friends or family, but with spreadsheets and projections. And now, to be told that I had no value, that my vacation, the one time I asked for a break, was somehow a betrayal, it was all too much. It started small, too small to notice at first. Little things, the tone of the emails, the way my boss began to respond to me, it wasn't like it used to be. In the beginning, it was the kind of relationship I thought was built on respect. But now there were cracks, tiny fractures that spread so quietly, I almost didn't realize what was happening. At first, it was just the odd missed meeting, a delayed reply to a question I sent hours earlier. I brushed it off. Everyone's busy, right? But then the replies grew shorter, colder. Instead of the usual thanks, great work, it was just a simple noted, and that was it. Not even a let's discuss or great job on this. Couldn't pinpoint when it started. Maybe it was right after I brought in that big deal. Everyone said it was a huge win, and for a moment, I thought everything was perfect. But looking back now, I wonder if it was the beginning of something else. The shift in tone was so subtle, I didn't even realize I was being pushed to the side. And then came the meetings. I'd always been the one in the front row answering questions, offering ideas. But suddenly, I felt invisible. The conversations grew shorter, like I was just a name on the list of attendees, nothing more. My opinions didn't seem to matter as much anymore. When I spoke, there was this cold silence afterward, like people were just waiting for me to finish, so they could move on to the next thing. It wasn't just the tone of the emails or the lack of attention in meetings. It was everything. Smiles that were once genuine now felt rehearsed, like everyone was pretending, even the boss. I tried to dismiss it. I told myself I was overthinking things. After all, I was busy. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the way the air felt different when I walked into the room. I was no longer the first choice to lead projects. The go-to person had somehow become the no-go person. One afternoon, I opened an email from my boss. The subject line didn't seem unusual, just an update on a new client. But when I opened it, I felt this strange chill run through me. The email was so detached. There was no warmth, no acknowledgement of the work I had been putting in. Just a few lines of dry corporate speak. Like I was just another employee on the roster. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. The words blurred together, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was like I was missing a piece of the puzzle. I scrolled back through the past few emails, no smiley faces, no encouragement, nothing personal. Had this been going on all along? Or had I just been too busy with my own work to notice? In that dimly lit office, alone at my desk, I could almost feel the walls closing in. The weight of the uncertainty pressed on me, like I was walking a tightrope, unsure of what would happen next. I closed the email, unsure whether to be angry or afraid, but something in me couldn't shake the growing unease. This wasn't just a temporary change. Something was shifting. And it wasn't just the business. It was me. I never saw it coming. Not like this. The email popped up on my screen, just another notification in the sea of work I was supposed to catch up on during my vacation day. But this one wasn't just another update or client request. This one felt different from. The moment I saw the subject line, a chill crept down my spine as I opened it. Subject: immediate termination of employment. The words on the screen blurred. I stared, unblinking, trying to force them to make sense, but they didn't. Couldn't you are being terminated from your position effective immediately due to a violation of company policy during your time off. You interviewed with a potential competitor. I blinked hard as if trying to wake up from a nightmare. Was this real? Is this actually happening? The weight of the words felt like they were sinking into my chest, pressing harder with every second. My breath caught in my throat, heart hammering in my ears. I had interviewed, but it wasn't for a job. I had just agreed to speak with them casually, nothing serious, no commitments, no contract. It was supposed to be an easy conversation, one I could have had in any normal professional setting. And yet, here I was, staring at my worst fear unfolding. The tears didn't come. Not yet. First there was disbelief, and then anger. Raw, blinding anger. How dare they? How dare they dismiss me after all the work I'd done, all the late nights I'd spent pushing this company to new heights. All the sacrifice, the deals closed, the praise I thought I'd earned. All of it felt like it had been reduced to nothing. More than a worthless number on a spreadsheet, a line item that could be wiped away with a few clicks of a keyboard. Sweat dripped from my palms as I gripped the phone tighter, willing myself not to scream. The walls felt like they were closing in around me. The quiet of my vacation day, the stillness I had been hoping for, was shattered by the stark, harsh. The reality that this was over, it didn't make sense. I just brought in a $2 million contract. Wasn't that worth something? Weren't those hours I spent sitting through endless calls late into the night supposed to count for something? But instead, this email, this cold, sterile notification, was all I received in return. A dismissal, as if I were just another disposable asset. I could feel the betrayal like a fist to my stomach. The trust I thought I had built, the loyalty I thought they saw in me, all of it now felt like a cruel joke. It stung more than anything I had ever experienced, this overwhelming, suffocating realization that my dedication hadn't mattered. I closed the email slowly, the weight of it almost too much to bear. There was no going back now. This wasn't just a mistake or a miscommunication. It was the end of everything I had worked for. It hit like a wave, the kind that doesn't let you breathe. 1 second, everything was fine, and the next. It felt like the world had dropped out from beneath me. I sat there, staring at my phone as though the screen would change, so I could somehow make the email go away. But it didn't. The words cold, lifeless remained, mocking me, taunting me with their finality. I don't even know how long I sat there. It could have been minutes or hours. Time had lost all meaning. Everything that I had spent the last few years of my life working for felt like it had slipped through my fingers in the blink of an eye. I tried to process it. I really did. But all I could feel was numbness. I wasn't angry anymore. It was just ... empty. It wasn't until I stood up from the table, aimlessly wandering into the next room, that the full weight of it hit me. The silence was deafening. Walked through the house, each step feeling heavier than the last. The furniture, once a symbol of my hard work. My success felt foreign now. Everything felt wrong, like I was in the wrong place. I opened the door to the living room, expecting to find something familiar, but all I saw was the stillness. Vacuum left by the absence of the life I'd built around this job. My phone buzzed again. I glanced at it, but it was just a reminder about a work meeting I would never attend. Another cold notification, another confirmation that my world had just been turned upside down. I couldn't even get myself to care. I should have been angry, furious even, but all I felt was this hollow emptiness, this overwhelming sense of devastation. I'd given everything, and now it meant nothing. I had invested so much of myself into the company, into the work, into that damn deal, and it didn't matter. I thought I would be okay. I thought I'd be able to process this and move on, but the truth was, I didn't know how to move on. What was I supposed to do now? What was left? I couldn't even bring myself to pick up the phone and call anyone. What would I say? What could I say? Hey, I just got fired for taking an interview during my vacation, even though I closed the biggest deal of my career. Isn't that crazy? I wanted to scream, wanted to cry. But all I could do was stand there, numb, surrounded by the quiet, staring at the same damn phone that had changed my life forever. It was like I was suspended in time, unsure of what to do next. The confusion was so deep it felt like I was suffocating. I didn't know how to move forward, but I couldn't seem to take a step back either. I was just ... lost. And for the first time, I didn't know where to go. I thought I could hold it together. I really did. But that was before I was alone with my thoughts. At first, it felt like I was walking through a haze, disoriented, still in shock. But as the days dragged on, the weight of it all started to crush me, slowly and relentlessly. The reality of what had happened settled in, and there was no escaping it. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of that email flashed behind my eyelids. The words echoed through my mind in a loop, growing louder with each passing hour. "You're terminated, effective immediately." It was like a mantra, a cruel reminder of the betrayal. The silence of the house was unbearable. I had grown so used to the noise of my work, the constant hum of meetings and emails, that now the quiet felt suffocating. I could hear every creak of the floorboards, every tick of the clock on the wall, as if the world was mocking me for being so lost, so broken. I couldn't escape it. The loneliness seeped into every corner of my life. My phone stayed silent. No messages, no calls, not even a word from the people I thought I'd worked beside, the ones I thought I could count on. I tried to distract myself, tried to bury the pain with mindless scrolling through social media, but even that felt hollow. It was like I was outside of myself, watching this version of me that didn't know what to do, didn't know where to turn. It was the dead of night when it hit me hardest. The tears came without warning, hot and furious, burning my face as I buried my head in the pillow. I'd spent so long trying to hold it together, trying to stay strong, but now I was crumbling. The grief felt like a physical weight, a pressure on my chest that I couldn't escape. I wanted to scream, to shout, to do something to release the flood of emotions, but I couldn't. All I could do was let the tears fall. Helpless against the storm inside me, the anger came next, rising up from somewhere deep within. I wanted to call them, to demand answers, to make them feel what I was feeling. But I didn't have the strength. All I could do was let the emptiness take over, let the tears flow freely as I lay there, feeling the weight of everything that had been ripped away from me. I could still feel the sting of betrayal in every corner of my mind. Constant reminder that I had been discarded like I didn't matter. The quiet became unbearable, and yet was the only thing that seemed real anymore. In those moments, I didn't know who I was anymore. The person I had been, the one who worked tirelessly, who pushed through every obstacle, that person was gone. All that was left was someone broken, someone who couldn't figure out how to piece themselves back together. It's funny how quickly everything changes. One moment, I was living in a world of late-night meetings, the thrill of a deal closing and the sense of purpose that came with it all, and the next, I was standing in my own empty apartment, staring at the life I once knew but no longer recognized. The apartment was quieter than usual. I had always lived in a bit of a rush, half-eaten takeout on the counter, an open mail on the desk, clothes tossed across the floor after another late night. But now it felt sterile, like the echo of my former self, lingering in every corner of the room, reminding me of the person I used to be. I walked through the space slowly, my footsteps loud against the hardwood floors. They were the only sound in the apartment, each step a reminder of the silence that had taken over my life. The space that had once been filled with the hustle and the satisfaction of work now felt suffocating, like I was trapped in a memory that I couldn't escape. The email notifications were still there, piling up. A dozen missed calls from the team, hundreds of unread messages. It was like I was looking at someone else's life, a life I used to have. I had spent so long building something, investing all my time, energy, and passion into this job, and now it felt so distant, like a fading dream. I couldn't bring myself to open the emails. Not yet. It was too painful to see how quickly everything had unraveled. Instead, I picked up my suitcase, the one I had packed for a weekend getaway that had turned into a nightmare. I stared at it for a moment, then slowly began to fill it. With the few belongings I had left: clothes, my toothbrush, the small things that had once been a part of my daily routine. But as I packed, I couldn't ignore the weight of it all. There was a sense of finality in every item I placed inside that suitcase. I was leaving behind a life I had worked so hard to build, a life that now felt like it belonged to someone else. Every jacket, every pair of shoes, every little thing was tied to a version of me that had already been discarded. The office had been just as empty. I hadn't expected much, but I still hoped for something in acknowledgement, maybe from the people I thought were my colleagues. Instead, the office was just another cold, lifeless space. My desk sat in the same spot, untouched, but it felt like a ghost. The chair I'd spent countless hours in was now just another chair, one I would never sit in again. I felt this quiet sadness, slow realization that everything I had worked for, everything I had invested in, was now gone. It wasn't just a job. It was the thread that had connected so much of my life, and now it was unraveling, leaving me with nothing but the pieces I had to pick up. But even through the sadness, there was a strange clarity. The more I packed, the more I understood. Had to let go. I had to walk away from this chapter, no matter how painful it was. The job had defined me for so long, but now it was time to define myself again. And as I closed the suitcase and walked out the door for the last time, I felt a small, quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, could start over. I don't know what I was hoping for when I called. Maybe I thought I could get some answers. Maybe. I wanted to hear the truth straight from him, the one person who could explain why everything had fallen apart so quickly. But now, as I stood there outside the office door, my heart was pounding, my mind a storm of anger and confusion. The meeting was set. I wasn't sure what I was going to say when I walked in, but I knew one thing: I needed closure. I needed to know why. Why after everything, after all the deals, the late nights, the hard work, I was being treated like this. I wasn't even angry at first, just confused. I kept thinking, maybe if I just hear his side of the story, maybe if I just get an explanation, I'll understand. But the second he opened the door, I knew it wasn't going to go the way I thought. He barely looked at me when he invited me in. No handshake, no apology, just the same sterile look he had been wearing for weeks. I could tell from the moment I sat down that this wasn't going to be the confrontation I had built up in my mind. I wanted to scream, to throw all my questions at him, but something about the coldness in his eyes stopped me. He wasn't the person I had once looked up to. Not anymore. He was just a stranger who was responsible for tearing everything down. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice breaking just slightly as I fought to keep my composure. "Why did you fire me? After everything I've done for this company? After everything I've given?" He didn't look at me. His hands were folded in front of him, the air between us as stiff and cold as the walls around us. "His company. Policy," he said flatly, as if those words explained everything. "You violated it by interviewing with a competitor during your time off. That's not acceptable." I felt the weight of his words, but they made no sense. This wasn't about the interview. It couldn't have been. This wasn't just about policy. There had to be more. There had to be something else. I'd worked my ass off for this company. I'd brought in millions in new business. And this is how it ended? Because I asked for one day off? You're telling me that's it? That's the reason? My voice cracked with frustration, my fists clenched in my lap, the anger bubbling up so fast I couldn't control it. I've been loyal to this company for years. I gave everything. And now, you're telling me I'm fired over one mistake? He didn't answer right away. His silence was deafening. I could feel the sweat beginning to form on my palms as I waited for him to say something, but the words didn't come. Instead, there was just the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. "It's not personal," he said, after what felt like an eternity. "It's just business. Just business." That was all he said. As if that was enough to explain it all. And in that moment, I realized there would be no closure, no answers. Just a vague, impersonal explanation that didn't make any sense. It wasn't about what I had done wrong. It was about something else entirely. Something I would never understand. I stood up, feeling like the air was too thick to breathe. I wanted to say something, to scream at him, but I knew it wouldn't matter. There was no point. Nothing I could say would change anything. I turned to leave, the frustration in my chest rising up like a wave. He didn't even move to stop me. No apology. No acknowledgement of everything I had given. Just that cold, indifferent look that told me everything I needed to know. I walked out of his office, but it wasn't just the door that closed behind me. It was the door to everything I had worked for, to everything I thought mattered. And now, I was walking away without any answers, without any sense of resolution. Just empty, aching confusion. In the aftermath of everything, it felt like I was walking through a fog. The weight of what had happened hung over me, and it was hard to know where to begin, to rebuild. Slowly, quietly, I started to pick up the pieces. The first step wasn't easy. I couldn't just pretend everything was fine. I had to confront the parts of myself I had been avoiding, the anger, the sadness, the bitterness that had built up inside. I reached out for help. I found myself sitting across from a therapist, someone who could guide me through the wreckage of what I had been feeling. At first, it was difficult to open up. I wasn't used to talking about my emotions. I was the type of person who buried everything, who kept going until I couldn't anymore. But as I spoke, the words started to come, and it was like a small weight began to lift off my chest. The first session was raw. I cried. I raged. I asked questions I would never have had the courage to ask before. The therapist didn't have all the answers, but that wasn't the point. What mattered was that I was learning how to feel again. Each session was a step forward, a moment of clarity in a world that had felt so chaotic. I began to realize that I had been so wrapped up in my work, in the idea of success, that I had forgotten who I was outside of it. The job had defined me for so long, but now I was starting to define myself. I also started to focus on the things I had neglected myself. The gym became my sanctuary. Sound of my sneakers hitting the pavement, the rhythm of each breath as I pushed myself harder than I ever had before. It wasn't about physical strength, though that came in time. It was about proving to myself that I could move forward, that I could take control of something in my life. I spent time reconnecting with friends, people I had lost touch with during the years I had been consumed by work. They were there, waiting for me, ready to help me rebuild. We spent hours catching up, laughing, talking about everything and nothing. For the first time in a long while, I felt the warmth of real connection. I wasn't alone. I had people who cared. But perhaps the most important part of my recovery was finding new passions. I picked up a guitar I had shoved in a closet years ago, letting the strings guide me through moments of quiet introspection. I found solace in the small things, reading books I had neglected, going on long walks, trying new hobbies that had once felt like distractions. I started to realize something. I am not my job. I am not defined by the work I do or the company I work for. I am more than that. I am a person with passions, with dreams, with a life that exists beyond spreadsheets and deadlines. Healing wasn't linear. Some days I felt strong, like I could take on the world. Other days I struggled. But with each day that passed, I grew a little bit stronger. I began to trust myself again, to believe in my ability to overcome, to rebuild. And that, more than anything, gave me hope. I was still figuring it out, still taking it one step at a time. But now, there was no rushing, no pressure. Just the quiet realization that piece by piece, I was finding myself again. It's been months since everything fell apart, and I can finally say I'm okay. Not perfect, not whole, but okay. And maybe that's enough. Looking back, it's hard to reconcile the person I was with, the person I am now. The anger, the betrayal, it still stings at times, but I've learned something I never thought I would. That peace doesn't come from understanding everything. It comes from accepting what is and letting go of what you can't change. There was a time when I thought I needed to have all the answers. I wanted to know why it happened, why I was treated the way I was. I wanted to confront the pain head-on, demand justice for what was taken from me. And for a long time I held on to that, refusing to forgive, refusing to move on. I was stuck, replaying the same thoughts over and over, caught in a loop that only made the pain worse. But then, something shifted. Slowly, imperceptibly, I began to let go of the need for closure, not because I had it all figured out, but because I realized that holding on was only hurting me. The answers would never come in the way I wanted them to, and that was okay. I didn't need them anymore. Forgiveness wasn't about letting the people who hurt me off the hook. It wasn't about saying what happened was okay. It was about freeing myself from the weight of that anger so I could move forward. I forgave. Not for them, but for me. The weight of the betrayal isn't as heavy now. I don't carry it with me the way I used to. Instead, I've made peace with it, accepted that it was part of my story. But it doesn't define me anymore as I stand here. Watching the sun set on another day, I can feel the weight lifting. There's something comforting in knowing that the worst is behind me, that I survived it, that I came out the other side stronger, more aware of who I am and what I want from life. I've learned to embrace the quiet moments, the stillness that once terrified me. They're not empty anymore. They're a reminder that I am whole, even when I'm alone. The horizon stretches out before me, wide and open, and I know there's a new chapter waiting for me. It might not look like the one I imagined, and it might not come with the kind of success I once thought I needed, but it will be mine. It will be authentic. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough. I'm no longer defined by the job I had or the betrayal I endured. I am defined by what I choose to become. And as I watch the sun dip below the horizon, I smile knowing that this is just the beginning of something new.